Hello, and welcome to Principles of Microeconomics. This is Module 5.3, and today we will discuss monopoly. Monopoly is one of the most extreme cases of no competition. So on one extreme, we have perfect competition, where we have lots and lots of buyers and lots of sellers selling an identical good, and free entry and exit into a market. On the complete opposite extreme, we have a monopoly. Here we have only one firm selling a good with lots of buyers. So the buyers have no options but to purchase this good from this single seller. There are a number of reasons why we would have a monopoly. Specifically, there are barriers to preventing other firms from entering into the market and diversifying or increasing the competition in the market. The first type of barrier is called a resource restriction. And this tells us that the monopoly is holding on to sole ownership of a key resource in production. So for example, many years ago, a company named De Beers had the monopoly on the diamond market. They owned somewhere north of 80% of all of the diamond production in the world. Another type of monopoly is what we call a government-created monopoly. And here, the monopoly is granted exclusive rights to produce or sell a specific good. Usually, this is related to contract laws, property right laws, copyright laws specifically, or patent laws. So here, with a government-created monopoly, the patent laws allow the company to be the only producer of the good or service, usually for a specific period of time. So for example, a pharmaceutical company has invested a lot of money into research and development of a new drug, and the government grants them a patent to be the only producer of that drug so that they are able to recoup their costs of the research and development. And lastly, we have natural monopolies. And these are monopolies that naturally occur in the economy because it is better for one firm to produce the good than to have two or more firms producing the good. In other words, it costs less to society to have one firm producing the good than to have more than one firm. Now, because the monopoly is the only producer in our market, they have complete price control. The firm is able to set the prices wherever they want. But remember, they are also going to be dependent on how much they can actually sell. So they can't make the price infinitely high. They set their prices based on the demand for the good. So let's look at an example to understand this in greater detail. So let's consider the market for diamonds where De Beers has a monopoly and it is deciding how much to sell and at what price. As you can see here, we have the various prices that De Beers can set and the corresponding quantities of diamonds that will be sold at each price. Remember, total revenue is simply price times quantity, and the total cost is going to be reported by the monopoly. So here what we observe is that we can calculate marginal revenue and marginal cost. Since a monopoly is also a profit maximizing firm, it's going to be interested in producing at a point where it can make the highest possible profits, or at a point where marginal revenue is equal to marginal cost. So if we calculate the marginal revenue and marginal cost, what we observe is that the optimal point of production is going to be where marginal revenue equals marginal cost, or the firm is going to be producing 300 units of diamonds and charging $1,400 for each of those diamonds. Now, if we look at this from a graphical perspective, what this is telling us is that, as you can see here, marginal revenue is equal to marginal cost. We'll call this point A. This is going to give us the quantity of 300 units. They're going to set a price based on the demand, which will be point B. So point B corresponds to the price of $1,400. Now the point where marginal revenue is equal to marginal cost is going to be $1,000. As you can see here, the firm is making a profit because it is charging more than the point where marginal revenue is equal to marginal cost. So what we can observe here is that, in fact, here's the price, 1,400. Here's the point where marginal revenue is equal to marginal cost. And here at 966 is the cost per unit, or the average total cost. So that this area represents the profit for the monopoly. Now, because the monopoly is charging more than the point where marginal revenue is equal to marginal cost, this yields some costs to society. What we think of as the point where total surplus is maximized, this is going to occur at the point where price is equal to the demand curve, which is equal to marginal cost. The point where demand is equal to marginal cost is what we call the socially efficient outcome. But we know that the firm is going to produce where marginal revenue is equal to marginal cost. So because of the difference between these points, we see that the monopoly outcome is going to yield some costs to society. In other words, as you can observe here, the price set by the monopoly will be PM. And they will produce where, once again, marginal revenue is equal to marginal cost and set the price according to the demand curve. Now, the socially efficient point is where the demand curve meets the marginal cost line, which will be right here. And the price, you can see, is below the price the monopoly would set. So this triangle right here, the difference between the monopoly outcome and the socially efficient outcome is the deadweight loss, or the loss to society from the fact that the monopoly is producing at a higher price and at a lower quantity than is socially efficient. There are a number of ways that we can regulate monopoly power, including creating antitrust laws to increase competition, trying to regulate natural monopolies and force them to produce closer to the efficient point of production, public ownership, where the government takes over and forces the company to produce at their socially efficient point of production. Or there's always the option to do nothing, because the cost of regulating a monopoly will be greater than any benefits to society of the regulation. Thank you so much for joining me in Module 5.3 on monopoly.